if you are online, and I thought I saw you out there. Why don't you hop on? Why don't you hop on in and share what's going on with Oregon Buys? We had a great steering committee meeting yesterday.
Yeah, we had a couple of lively. We had the DPO council, and then right after that, steering committee. And so we've got a lot of information to share. It's very obvious that the phase 1 go live is getting closer because questions and lots of activity. So feel free to ask questions or submit in chat. But let's get started. We're gonna just go through the timeline, task, training information, phase 2 waves, and then a little outreach for some subject matter experts that we may need for phase 2. So we show this every time, but we've got phase 1, that's the orphan replacement and marketplace browsing, and July 1 is the day for that. And then we buckle down and start working through the waves on the procure to pay. So bringing in the finance side of the house. So one of the things that actually DPO Council had asked for was a consolidated list of everything that the agencies needed to be doing. We kind of had direction while funneling through the core team. Things were getting a little hard to keep track of. So this is just a desk reference, if you will, of everything that is on the plate of the core teams and when it's either due or when the discussion and final direction will be given. If it has the core team session and a number, that just means that information is gathered. We make sure that the agencies have their plans and know what they need to do with that information. The training is starting. The main training is, and I think I've actually got a little better. Let me save that for a minute because I've got a different slide there. But are there any questions about anything that's on this list that you all would like to ask? Or Kim, I can't watch chat and do this PDF. So if there's anything in chat, if Kim could or Brian can share that with me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, so all of the core teams have this, the DPOs, this is another piece that we're sharing widely so that everyone is on the same page. Tomorrow, is that on here? The agency configuration templates are due tomorrow, and that's really kind of the first big piece. That's setting up departments and users for phase 1, not phase 2, which, like I said, will be the finance side of the house. The facilitated training, now this is for those agencies with core teams, and that just has to do with the size of the agencies and the complexity of the work they do. And we are, there's a facilitated bid solicitation and master blanket PO. It's live webinar. It's 3 days for 2 hours, and we'll offer that 6 weeks consecutively. You only go one time for the 3 sessions. I don't know why that's so hard to explain, but it is. And when we first put it out and people thought they had to go all 6 weeks, we quickly had to put that fire out. So that is in iLearn for registration right now. It's free. For procurement professionals, they do get 6 learning credits for attending this. For department access users, there will be self-paced modules, and That's just for like general navigation of the system, marketplace shopper, real basic training. The other modules there'll also be self-paced and modules that will reference the facilitated training, so that if you need a reminder on certain pieces of that work, you won't have to go reattend the whole training. You can go do sound bites of these self-paced modules. And those will start uploading to iLearn. We're hoping by next week. Those will be in iLearn and will transfer over to the new Workday learning as well. So those will be ongoing. But I think as of yesterday, we put the registration out on iLearn last Friday, and yesterday we had a little over 100 folks already registered. The nice thing about Zoom facilitated training is there's not a limit on how many people can attend. So we'll be able to facilitate what people need. So that's where we are on training right now.
Hey, Jenny.
Yes, sir? Uh-huh.
I know that a lot of the concerns around training have to do with the fact that it's just in time training. And it's not so much for the first phase, but as we get into phase 2, we want to be prepared to talk to our staff about the fact that it is just in time. And we're doing that quite on purpose, so that the material is very fresh in their minds as they transition to the new system. And I know that a lot of the anxiety is people just haven't seen the system yet. They haven't gotten to touch it. So are there going to be ways that we can prep folks so that they can at least feel comfortable about it, knowing that the training is going to come about just a mere weeks before they have to use it?
Well, I mean, there's a train environment that people will be able to get into. The organization administrators at each of the core team agencies will facilitate that. The challenge is for getting in early is the production system is a live system. We've already got Secretary of State and Forestry use the system currently. So we can't, we have to manage that pretty tightly. But they will have train access. It won't exactly mirror their agency, but they will be able to touch and feel before the 16th of June. I'm not sure of the timing of when each OA is able to set their team up, but the first step is what's due tomorrow is building out those organizations, and they're turning in worksheets that then will be uploaded, so we begin to create users so that they can get access. I kind of went around a circle on that. Did I make it worse, Brian?
Well, no, you made it a little bit better, and don't worry about going around in circles, because my question was kind of circular too. I know that you gave the steering committee a brief demo yesterday, or PHI gave us a brief demo, and it was for folks that aren't on the steering committee. We got to see how you would pull up a simple query about buying some laptop computers, and it really was that Amazon-esque type of an experience. And I did not enjoy my procurement days early in my career, but if I had this kind of tool, it's something that would be appealing to me and make my job a little bit easier. So hopefully the experience that you get exposed to will end up being much the same.
And that marketplace demo is the browsing that will be in the first phase. That's where that comes into play, and that's the training for that is actually quite simple, and that is self-paced. The the actual procurement as far as doing solicitations and going through evaluations and awards, that's that BP, which is basic purchaser. But that's really the procurement professional, which is more involved and needs more facilitated training. And we're learning how to facilitate. I mean, the work order that we executed, you know, we thought we'd be doing in person, you know, in computer labs where everybody can sign in and be working at the same time. And we've definitely had to make a big shift to facilitate all of this virtually. So kind of good news, bad news for that. But I think the ready reference modules will be a big help for going back and refresher when you get new people coming on, being able to get them up to speed without having to wait until a class is taught. So if there are no other questions, I'll keep moving here. We did finalize the waves for phase 2. And this is just a breakdown of the size of the large, medium. We centralized, decentralized. We were able to facilitate everyone's needs. We had a fair amount of small agencies that haven't really engaged yet, so we had to put them into a wave, but we continue to try to bring everyone in the folds. If you have a question about your wave, it is posted, the actual agencies are posted out on our project website. So I mentioned earlier that this is kind of an outreach, but we go live with phase 1, Orphan Replacement and Marketplace Browse, July 1st. And we begin phase 2 with our very first wave in August. And that is that procure to pay functionality. And we're a procurement shop doing the major work. And we have had a lot of representation from the finance side of the house. But we really need about 10 accounts payable subject matter experts with in-depth of processes. And we're trying to reach across the enterprise so that we have representation of as many processes as we can. It will be about a 4-week window of doing all of the inventory of the various processes, probably 4 hours a week at the most, and that may be 2 hours for AP and 2 hours for some other, we don't really know. And the timing's terrible because we really need to do it in July in order to keep things moving. But if you or someone, or if someone on your team has this knowledge and has the interest and time, we would certainly love for you to reach out to us and volunteer for that. And if you need more information on what it is, you can also reach out and I will put you in touch with kind of the AP side of the house. This is the work between the system and our stars, which is live right now. Secretary of State and Forestry, we have that interface, but we realize there are lots of other needs. So I'll put that out there, and oregonbuys.info at oregon.gov is where you can reach out, or feel free to reach out to me if you've got questions. Just another reminder on Orphan Replacement that all state agencies and ORCAP members transition at the same time. This is the proverbial big bang. June 16th, Orphan moves to read only. June 23rd, agencies will be able to go in and finish off any contracts that are uploaded through the spreadsheet load for some of the smaller agencies that don't have that many. They'll be able to go in and input them. They'll be able to prep documents for if something needs to be released on July the 1st. So that will be a crazy busy week. And lastly, vendor registration. We continue to do outreach at all levels, and it's really taken every level. We've gotten most of the big ones. We did a huge email campaign last month and had great success. We're up over, I think we're at about 9,400 suppliers registered. We're down to that, the suppliers that are really more agency specific. So agencies are also doing outreach. We've pulled some reports that allow the agency to see which of their contracts don't have a supplier registered yet. So we continue to try to outreach from every direction without bombarding. We are going to do one more enterprise campaign the week of May 19th. We know that there'll be that this is going to be ongoing. But we appreciate those agencies that are actively helping us with this. And that's what I've got. I think I went over my time, but any questions in closing? We'll share this deck with you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. If you ever have any questions from Jenny, just give us a holler, give Jenny a call directly, and we'll be able to answer those for you. Going to move on to payroll timekeeping with Joyce and Seth. How are you guys today?
We are good. I'm going to start, and I'm just going to cover some of the high-level things. And one is that we have a new co-sponsor. So, and I don't know if I shared this last time, but hopefully not. Our new co-sponsor, sponsoring alongside Brian, is Chris Kautz from OHA. And she has hit the ground running, jumping in and adding value to the project. So we're very excited to have her. And the other big milestone of this time period is that we finished our architect sessions, and we are now officially into the configure and prototype phase of the project. We're still working on nailing down some of the details around some of the interfaces, but that's the last thing that's left in the architect stage. So we're excited about that. And the next thing that will happen in the prototype stage is the middle 2 weeks of May. IBM will come back and show us how they've configured the system first time around, and then we can talk about tweaks and that wasn't exactly what we were thinking, that kind of a thing. So we're excited about that. So Seth, do you want to say anything?
Thanks, Joyce. Yeah, just kind of a reminder about the timeline overall. Like Joyce said, we're just moving into the configuration and prototype. So once IBM, we get through what I call a little show and tell phase in May, they'll go and actually configure the system, the tenant to our requirements, and we should have something in late summer for the project team to start looking at. And then that's when the testing phase really kicks in from there. And so for agencies out there, for your payroll project champions, if you're not sure who that is, please visit our website. And you can see a lot of agencies have a dedicated payroll project champion, which is the project team's contact to disseminate information and keep them informed. And then in the October-November timeframe, we'll get into end-to-end testing, where we'll ask agencies to come in, go through some scenarios, start looking at training materials for the payroll partners. I know that's going to be one of the key factors with this, is make sure we start getting hands-on experience for our payroll partners across the enterprise. And then, we still have a projected go live of July 1st of 2022. So I think that's everything I got. Brian, you got anything else for us?
Just a reminder to everybody that the system is going to be configured to operate essentially just like OSPS is operating today. That means no changes for salary to hourly, no changes in pay frequency at this time. We will be having those discussions later on. But for right now, put everybody's mind to ease. We are not going to do very much to your paycheck other than produce it out of another system, at least for the time being. Any questions at all on payroll timekeeping? If you have not already done so, encourage your staff to go in, use Workday to request time off. This will help save steps later on once we transition fully over into payroll, because entering your leave time and making that request in Workday automatically feeds into your timesheet. So it will ultimately save them a step or two later on in the process. I know that sounds thrilling to everybody. If you have any problems at all, give us a call. Okay, we'll transition over to the Workday proper work and to the learning module as well. So take it away, Twyla. And Twyla, if you want to hand it over to Rocky afterwards, that would be awesome.
Fabulous. That is the plan. Thank you, Brian. Excuse me. So I don't have a lot for you today. And my allergies are killing me. Sorry about that. I wanted to let you know, since our last meeting, we talked about changing the work contact. That was to address individuals like board and commission members, off-season seasonals, putting their personal email in their work contact field. We have now changed that. So work email is not required. And those individuals, if they need to password reset, it will actually send to their personal email. So that change is done. We also changed some security settings to better align with our security standards that were required. They were changed right after we did our design and rolled out. So now our password is, when you have to reset your password again, it's not making everyone reset their password. It's now 10 digits, and we also changed the timeout to 15 minutes instead of 20. So we made some security changes that was nice to check off our list. We also did a website, our Workday login redesign. You can see on my screen there. Now we have Workday Learning is coming this summer. And then we talked to agencies, and we did a new contact page that now has HR contacts. This will obviously change to Workday Learning contacts once learning is implemented, and then payroll contacts. And we launched this early last week. And we've already seen, and this is really about just getting employees to get to the right place the first time, because we were getting a lot of calls directly to us that really were agency calls. And so we've seen that has already made a huge improvement. So that redesign has been launched. The biggest thing really going on for us right now that you need to know about, other than obviously Workday Learning going live, because we're very excited about that, is our cost center redesign that we're doing. So currently cost centers are duplicated each appropriation year. We already have 22,000 cost centers in Workday, and because that includes those for appropriation year 17, 19, and 21. And we obviously use cost center allocations in distribution presents. Why does Workday need cost centers? For payroll, agency extract, also known as the agency continuity feed, Active Directory, reports in Workday, and web services. So this is kind of a before and after. Now I do want to say that this excludes ODOT and aviation. They do not use the AY at the beginning of their cost centers. ODOT does something a little bit different with a single AY. So what we are looking at doing, instead of taking all of the cost centers and duplicating them for 7-1 and putting an action on all workers, because that's what we did last time. If you remember, Workday was unavailable for 3 days, and we literally put in an action on every employee's record to switch their cost center. So instead, what we are doing is looking at deriving the cost center. So the system, based on the action, the system will know if it's a 21 or a 23 or potentially a 19. So you can see down at the bottom of the screen, it says before and after. So right now it's a 21, and the cost center in Workday, you'll see it without the AY, but we will be deriving it. So this kind of explains it. We're going to remove all the 21 the AYs from the 21 cost centers. All workers and positions cost centers will show 10 characters. We're going to change all the integrations to derive the AY. And we're going to use calculated fields to determine the AY. So essentially think of it this way. If you were in August 21, and you did an action, an HR person did some kind of action that was back in April 21, when they did the action on the employee, the cost center would know to send the 21 because it was retroactive into that AY. We're going to change all the reports and web services. Some pros and cons, and really this is so you have them. I will provide it afterwards. But really it's going to clean up our data overall. It's going to be better for our employees. Many of you may remember the cost center shift last time was very painful because what happened was, here we were in Workday about 6 months. We inserted this action, and then we had a whole bunch of retroactive action on employees, and we would have to take off that action, do the retroaction, and then put it back on. And it caused a lot of confusion, and we are very confident this is a much better design. We did consider the alternatives if we should continue to do what we were doing, or consider adding another custom organization to address the issue, and that was determined not the best answer. So future state cost centers will no longer be duplicated. The AY will be system derived. And the cost center will display with the PCA and index on workers and positions. We'll be able to greatly reduce the number of cost centers, cleaning up the ones from the previous, inactivating them. And we will, of course, be able to do this in costing allocations and distribution percents. So what's ahead? We have done a great amount of testing. Our final is payroll regression testing, and then we'll review the results and determine the final implementation schedule. And the goal is to have this completely implemented before 7/1. So that's cost centers. Does anybody have a question for me on cost centers? I just want to make sure you guys understand it because it is a significant design change. I did Financial Leadership Council last week. I've talked to the state CIO or the CIO Council. I just really want people to understand that it's going to be a little different, but we really do believe it will make things significantly better. Any questions for me? Okay. Yes, Brian?
Twyla, have you gotten any feedback from accountants and budgeteers? And I would imagine that this would actually make things a bit smoother for them, because now you're talking about consistency in the coding across multiple enterprise applications.
Yes. Yeah. So Financial Leadership Council is a lot of financial people, but I also have talked to, SFMS and our Sabres partners, and just trying to make sure there's no stone unturned. We thought we might have a little curveball with capital construction stuff, but we believe that is not an issue. So feeling pretty solid about this, and a lot better than what we did last time. I'm just so thankful that we came up with a strong design that we can move forward on. So this next slide for you is I just thought you might find it interesting. I get statistics every month from Workday on what we're seeing as far as number of users, logins, where they're logging in from. I shared it with the State CIO Council, and I thought you guys might find it interesting, maybe not, but it's here in the slide deck if you want to see what the numbers look like. And that's what I have, and I'm going to hand it to Rocky unless there's any questions for me. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time always. Rocky, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Twyla. I am just going to give my computer a second here to catch up with me. So let me know when you guys see my slideshow.
You're good.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for giving us a couple minutes on your agenda. The LMS replacement project has a lot going on between now and the end of the biennium. The first thing I wanted to touch on was just a few of our communication channels. We did in April, early April, get some all learner messages sent out via email, as well as to agency partners. So many of the agencies have public partners, and so we, in addition, sent all the agency learning contacts with some templated messages, as well as some resources to get that message out to those people, the public partners. Those documents are published to our webpage. Highlighting our webpage, we have a ton of information and communication happening out there on a regular basis. That is a public facing webpage. So anyone who is interested can go and consume some information and get the latest of what's happening with the project. The other communication channel I wanted to highlight, especially as we are getting closer to go live, is our open houses. We have a new series every month that we put out. We do 30-minute informational sessions. It's the same information in each session. So, and then a new series starts every month. Currently, we are in series 6, and we have 2 more dates coming on that. So on the webpage, there is a flyer and information. So anyone who's interested could add those to their calendar. If you want to attend a live session, if you are interested in what we've covered in the past, some of the topics we've covered in the past are around terminology roles, some of the system configurations, some short demos. Those recordings are available. Links to them are on our webpage, and those are currently in iLearn for consuming. And then finally, we had a live event held earlier this week. It was a cross-functionality workshop, and that was really focused on connecting our HR groups with the learning groups. Many of the learning professionals do reside under HR. It's not the case all the way across the enterprise, and many of the program areas you all may also have learning embedded in them. Anyhow, this discussion was mainly driving how Workday Learning has cross-function touch points with specific areas in HR, and how we can leverage those for the enterprise. So if you are interested in what was covered on that, it is also out there on our webpage. Will be later today with a full Q&A, as well as what was presented. And then moving on, training. So for Workday Learning, we are using an audience-based rollout approach with our training. Much of this is also in line with that essentially just-in-time training, like Jenny and Brian were talking about earlier with org and buys. Right now, we do have some training in progress with the elevated learning roles, and they have the most administrative actions in learning as we come up against our timing and soft launch. So they are beginning to consume training now, and they will have training available to them through Go Live. And then late May, we are looking at rolling out also to managers and all learners. So all learners includes employees, contingent workers, and those extended enterprise public partners. And then early in June, we actually have instructors. So it seems a little odd. However, instructors' roles are about managing rosters and etc. And because our go live is in June, instructors having that fresh access and information and resources, because they really don't have a lot of interaction until learners consume training. So that's why they are targeted for later in June. There are several resources being developed and will continue rolling out. Some resources we have out there currently are the training calendar and training catalog. Those are both being published to our webpage as well today for broader use. Our learning professionals have been provided information in the recent weeks, so they have had some early access to when training is coming for their roles and how to kind of plan for that. So do I have any questions about training? We do have a number of modes of training that we are going to be using. Obviously, virtual instructor-led training, e-learnings, resource guides, job aids, other on-demand materials that are rolling out with much of the training. I do know that all of our live virtual instructor-led training are also going to be turned into on-demand training in the future moving forward.
Any questions for Rocky or Twyla, or even going back to Seth and Joyce as well?
All
Okay,
right,
folks,
so
appreciate. Oh, go ahead.
Quiet
Keep
group.
going. I thought you were done. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Brian. Nope, I've got one more. I will I will get out of your hair in just a second. I wanted this group to know, yeah, so training is out there starting to roll out. If you're not seeing it yet as a manager, you will look to see it likely the week of May 24th. And again, that will be offered through our June Go Live. So ta-da, we actually have, I'm happy to present that we actually have a formal Go Live date of June 16th. This allows our soft launch period to take place. So for the learning management project, we have, of course, all the learning professionals out there in the world who have been using iLearn for a long time. Our soft launch period was designed for a couple of reasons. One, we know that those people who are subject matter experts today in iLearn are becoming students of Workday Learning. And so this soft launch period really allows and affords them the ability to have some time actively working in the solution so they can leverage some of that experience so that they are experts before they are looking to support their agencies in Go Live. So some of the work that they're going to be doing is preparing resources and content for their learners in Workday Learning. So much of you know that we did a data conversion in January. And as we know, training is always changing and moving forward. So some of the work agencies do have ahead in that soft launch period is any updates to training that happened after our final data conversion in January. Some training may need to be massaged, updated, have additional dates added, begin scheduling offerings in the future past that June date. So this period of time really allows those elevated roles to get in there and get more comfortable with the system while also preparing it for their consumers. The other important thing to note here is that training will stay active in iLearn during the soft launch period. So there will be no blackout period for training. So I will note that completions that happen in iLearn Oregon through June 15th will be on workers' training records in Workday on a nightly basis. So anything that happens during the soft launch period is still going to be recorded to their Workday profile. So if there are any questions around soft launch go live, feel free to email our LMSRP team page. We have a group that monitors that regularly, and more than likely we have a lot of resources that might answer your question out on our webpage. So I have added those here. I think Twyla will drop that in for me. I don't have the ability to attach in the chat at the moment, but if there's no questions, I will pass it back over to Brian.
All right, folks, I hope that these updates are useful for you. Would appreciate any feedback you have on the updates themselves. If they're beneficial, great. We'll just keep continuing to roll stuff out. If they're not adding any benefit to you, I'd like to know that as well so that we can continue to use our time efficiently. I know that when I travel around the agencies and make presentations, one of the things that I hear is moaning and gnashing of teeth when it comes to using the Workday product. If we don't have any feedback on it or nothing's really bubbling up that's new, it's hard to improve the product. The more feedback we get from you, the more that we can be actively improving the product on a go forward. If it's just the same themes over and over that have been addressed, then it's a little difficult for us to address that. This is a good forum to do some myth busting, some truth testing, and really, if you want to drive a change, this is a great forum in which to do that. So. All right, gang, thank you so much for giving us updates on those 3 projects. We're going to move on now to kind of the heart of this month's meeting, and that's going to be a focus on EAM. Again, for those of you that are just joining us, not so much a running down through each of the 5 disciplines inside of EAM, but rather opening up in more of just an open forum. We're coming up to the end of the biennium and the beginning of next biennium. Our budgets are beginning to take some shape. And one of the things that EAM struggles with is, what do the resources look like that are necessary to fulfill the legislative direction for the 21-23 biennium. I know that Brian King does a lot of outreach for fleet services. Jeremy and Brady will do reach outs when it comes to real estate services and whatnot. But this time it gets a little bit more wrinkly with the return to work or return to the office place that's going to occur around the beginning of September. Joining us is Shannon Ryan. She is co-chair of the Return to the Office, along with her other co-chair, Madeline Zeig. I don't think Madeline was able to join us today. So really, I'm just going to open this up to folks. Let us know where your needs are. DHS OHA has been kind enough to reach out on fleet stuff, but where are some of the changes that you have out in your agency, and what are the questions you have when it comes to returning to the office place?
Hey, Brian, it might be helpful if you stop sharing the agenda so we can.
I could do that.
Okay, just a suggestion.
I'm still learning this. It's only been a year. So Shannon, can you give us a little bit of an overview of some of the discussion that
Sure.
you had?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. So as Brian mentioned, Madeline Zeig and I are co-chairs of the reopening government. And just on very broad strokes and overview, this group is about 30 people in total, half of which are from the deputy director and some directors space. And then we've got HR advisors and then program advisors who are like content experts, if you will. So from our team, we've got Brian King for parking considerations and Jeremy and Brady for the real estate pieces. So this group's directive is to not map out the new world order and make any sort of proclamations. Rather, it is to provide recommendations around policies and guidelines for the governor's consideration. So our goal is to have those guidelines and recommendations to Katie Kova, our director, by July 1st. And then those will get vetted through the governor's office so that we've got a pretty very clear idea of, clearer idea how we're going to navigate getting the workforce back into the office, whatever that looks like. So that's kind of the broad structure of it all. Two things to know that Katie mentioned right at the opening statement. So we've met twice now, earlier in this month, and then just last week we're meeting every 2 weeks. This advisory group. Her message to that advisory group was, one, we're not going back in terms of how we worked before, being that everybody is in the office every day for the most part, and rather we are going to embrace a hybrid model. And what that looks like for every agency is going to be different. There is no one size fits all. There are also folks that can't work remote, never have worked remotely. So we're pulling those considerations into the mix as well. So that's the first piece. And the second piece, her question to us and really kind of sets the tone is, if you could play COO for a day, what kind of enterprise culture would you want to create or would you want to set up? So this really is, and I completely concur with everything she said, not just because she's our boss, but because I really truly believe that there is a question and I can't see whose hand that is. So why don't you just...
It's
jump...
me, Jean Straight.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I'll put my camera on. So
okay.
one of the things that we've been wondering about is, we have people that right now, they're all working from home, but they're stationed in Salem. They live in Portland. We're wondering if there's going to be some kind of solution around maybe hoteling in Portland where people can register and be able to go in to print or whatever, since printing can't be done at home. That's been the biggest issue we've had with our people, is they want a way to be able to print and that kind of stuff without driving all the way to Salem. So
sure, and that's an awesome question. And I think it might be helpful if I can share my screen and we'll go over the proposed scope. So that's going to get to like what we're talking about and kind of what that body of work looks like, so that I'm not putting your question off, but that may answer your question. Cool. But I see another hand. Brian, you had a question, Brian Bowling?
I'll hold until after you go through your stuff.
Okay, cool. So I will share my screen, and this is not a glamorous document. This is my working document. So pardon it's just an ugly Word document. So, but I'm looking. So this is the scope that was adopted by the group. So a couple things can everybody see that first before I start talking?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, great. So again, these are kind of my notes, so apologize for how unorganized it is, but I wanted to start with the guiding principles. So as we go through our scope and make decisions for the recommendations, rather the advisory group as a whole is making these recommendations. These are the principles that guide us. Right. So equity inclusion is enormous, especially when we get to those folks that can't work remotely versus the ones who can. And then how do we consider that as we map out, the new recommendations? Sustainability is also enormous. We've experience like every other state, and most of the industry, our greenhouse gas emissions have plummeted, which is awesome, while we've all been working remotely, or most of us have been working remotely. So we'd like to capture that as a goal to keep those greenhouse gas emissions lower as we think about the new hybrid workspace. Enhancing employee experience. So this is a pivotal moment for us to become an employer of choice going into the future. So not that we're not an employer of choice right now, but as we look to recruiting and retention, we have an opportunity right now to be as agile and nimble and attractive as, say, private sector sort of opportunities. Fiscal responsibility, of course, that is a no-brainer. And this other piece, and Jean, this kind of sort of might get to what you're talking about, is this. And this does get to, creating space that is intended for to help synergies between agencies and business groups and business flow for optimal service delivery and outcomes. So that's a lot of words, but basically it means part of our scope in the phase 2, which I'll get to in a moment, is contemplating regional sort of offices where if you are a state employee, then you go there to print, to meet with someone, to do whatever you need to do, regardless of agency boundaries. So we're also doing some work with the with Oregon Business, who's exploring this notion from a little bit different purview. They're focusing on Main Street and getting broadband to the rural communities. So I think there's an opportunity there. So certainly these kinds of places will exist, Jean, to your question, in, say, a Portland or a Salem, but we're also really looking to push out into the rural communities to support the rural communities from an economic development perspective, as well as those employees that we've had that have moved to the rural parts of the state because they could. So any questions on that so far? Okay, I'm just going to keep talking. If someone has a question, because I kind of can't see hands right now, just please just interrupt me, please. So the scope, we've broken out into 2 phases, knowing that we're probably not going to get it all right on September 1. So phase 1, and these dates are just approximations. It's us getting in the door, getting our folks in the door, figuring out what works for us. Maybe we try something that doesn't work, we have to try something else, and maybe that will work. And take those lessons learned, all of us, all the agencies, and then go into phase 2, which will be the permanent go forward. So some agencies might get there right out of the gate and others might take longer. So this is a very arbitrary sort of time frame. So again, our charge is to provide guidelines and recommendations for the governor's consideration, as well as consistent with labor agreements. Now that piece is very important because we all know labor, the bargaining process is going on right now. So some of these items may be determined or bargained in the bargaining process. So that should conclude by July 1. So we're going about the scope by kind of pushing the HR policy piece, that work piece kind of later in the process, just so we can allow some time for bargaining to progress. So our goal is to safely and holistically get our employees back into the workplace. So these subgroups are things that we'll need to think about. So HR and equity and health, certainly space expectations is huge, and IT considerations. So IT considerations is a common theme here. The other piece that is, it's mentioned, but it's not, again, this is my draft. So there's a nicer version out there. So IT considerations is ongoing, and the other piece is change management. So we know that we're going to need to avail change management resources, communication tools to the agency. This group will also we're putting together a communications group for this advisory group, and they'll be integral in helping with that as well. We also need to get to come up with some sort of criteria or rubric for agencies to use to ascertain what their own hybrid model looks like. And again, the equity piece and space and IT and HR will be part of that. And then we need to figure out what practices and policies we need to change right now to get people back in the door. So permanently assigned vehicles, we may or may not need to do that, but it was surfaced as something we need to think about. Parking, of course, we've already worked on. I'll get to that in a moment. That any changes needed to the current remote working, teleworking policies, space utilization models, enterprise-wide, that's going to be a big body of work that's going to go on for quite some time. And then what sort of investment do we as employers make in the home environment, and what does that mean for workers' comp? So that question's come up quite a bit as well, and it's kind of varied with from agency to agency. And then, and here's the change management piece, to provide tools and resources and training for, certainly employees, but also for managers to help with the culture change piece and performance management. I know that's been a thing, right? Performance management remotely. So kind of codifying that into some more formal training. And then this is very important. We actually track what we've done, what we've learned, what we got wrong. So with supporting metrics around these pieces so that we can apply that in a phase 2. Again, arbitrary sort of time frame here. But the point is we need to get dirty, if you will, figure out what's going to work, and then base our permanent decisions and investments specifically in people, place, and thing on the go forward.
Hey, Shannon, I know that you're working from notes right now. When will some of this information be available to agencies? And would it be okay to just share your notes heavily labeled as draft or heavily labeled as these are just Shannon's notes?
So that's the seemingly straightforward question. And there's been much chatter about this lately because the folks in the advisory group also want to have something that they can share, not just with their agencies, but also with their, policy colleagues and sister agencies. So we are pulling together, and the wrinkle here is labor. And just so this room knows and needs to stay in this room, the labor has asked for a seat at to be a part of this advisory group, which CHRO said, no, this is for managers, and this is how we're going to figure out the go forward for everyone. But labor is very, very interested in what we're talking about. So it's a matter of timing, of sequencing that sharing of information, because we don't want to share it out with everybody else before it's shared with labor. So that is being worked through now. So we will be able to share information about, probably the scope. And this is what we've done so far in the scope. We are very clear that we're not sharing recommendations until we've got all of the recommendations. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, and I think that that's fair. I think it's also fair to say that no topic is off the table yet. As a matter of fact, you're looking for even more ideas that may be floating out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So external, I'm not going to belabor that point. And then here's our success criteria. So, and these are, think of this as the end of the very long day goals. This is how we reposition ourselves to be, the state of Oregon 2.0. So employee experience, These are all very important. I already touched on recruitment, retention, and future facing. And by that, we mean, let what we've learned and how we want to work, the culture we want to create, and how we want to conduct our business, let that guide our decisions in our buildings, in our space, in our IT, in everything that we do. Keeping in mind those sustainability considerations that I've already talked on or touched upon. And then again, fiscal responsibility. So the shared resources between agencies could be really transformational, really, and sharing of space. And Jean, this kind of gets back to that drop-in all-state place for people to go. Right size our vehicle usage and certainly guide our capital investments, not just for DAS, but for all of us.
So Tom from TSPC has a question in the chat room. And Tom, so good to see you again. He writes, I know that we're looking at this from a 30,000 foot level for now, but is there research going on about making shared space or hot desking environments both welcoming and truly shared? One concern is that people want their space, but they're only using it sporadically, and will it be others as well? How do you manage that, and what kinds of investments and resources will agencies have to make that transition? And Tom, I can say, yes, we are very actively involved in some of that research. My national association, as well as Shannon's national association, are both working on this. So state chief administrative officers and facilities administrators are both working on this. Shannon and I are both personally involved in a lot of that discussion as well as looking at the tools that may be available for hot desking, not just desks, but reserving parking spots and all of those other kinds of materials. It's not really the wild west, but it's kind of close. But Shannon, what more specifically are you looking at?
Yeah, so we are looking, so that needs technology solutions, right? To effectively hot desk and hotel, it's going to require one, management of those folks' expectations who say, no, this is my place. This has always been my place. This will be my cube until, you can pry it from my cold, dead fingers, basically. I think we all know those folks. And then there's going to be places that are hoteling and hot desking. And so that's going to require a technology solution. So we're actually demoing a couple of different solutions through the course of this work group. One of them will be an offshoot in a DAS-owned building, an offshoot of our current technology platform that everybody uses for facilities. It's called Tririga. What's really interesting is we are looking into what's available on MS365. So we're going to have that demo next week. And apparently it can also reserve space. So that would be amazing because everybody's already got that. And that could actually apply across the entire enterprise, both in the public and private portfolios. So as for who gets to hot desk and who doesn't, those are some of the questions that we are wrestling with within this work group. And you can expect that at the end of this, we will propose guidelines for agencies for your consideration around who, there are resident workers who don't have a choice, but then there are other folks who do have a choice. And so it's that choice piece, like what are the sideboards on that? And so we will propose some kind of sideboards, but again, each agency is going to need to figure out what that looks like for themselves. So DAS isn't going to, draw a hard line there, but rather just some guidelines. And I'm not sure if that answered everything in your question. So please.
Well, thank you. If this is taking us off the rails, I apologize, but
no,
I think one of the things that that I've encountered with when I talk to staff about this kind of thing is they've got their stuff at their
Mhm.
desk, right? All their
Mhm.
pictures, their plants, their knickknacks, their doodads, and the thought of going into somebody else's space like that is off-putting to folks. But the thought of giving up that kind of space is also off-putting, right?
Mhm.
It's not just the technology. The technology is a challenge, but doable. I feel like the atmosphere, if you will, the ambiance is as a part of the culture is more of a challenge. And I just wondered if you're
Mhm.
also looking at that and going to be able to help us, especially the small. TSPC is a small agency.
Sure.
We have very few resources and kind of cast off furniture and things like that. And I was just wondering if there's going to be any kind of resources to help us through, both in terms of ideas as well as um, kinds of furniture or furnishings to make that an easier transition.
So there's the change. This gets to change management, right? The folks that
Yeah.
don't want to give it up and don't want to be in somebody else's space. So a fundamental principle of hoteling is that it is bereft of personal effects, right? It's just a place that you go to put down your computer and you work there for a day or 2 days or whatever. So there are going to be adopters for that and certainly not. And so that's why the onus, the management onus around this is not insignificant. And culture change is one of the hardest kinds of change to manifest, right? So we will have change management folks. We have change management folks within the enterprise that we have sent to that training and that certification. And I can't remember what that training's called, but I know that there are about 25 of them across the enterprise. So part of our work in this group is that we're going to activate those folks to help the state internally to get us to a place where we can get people to embrace hoteling. And you know what, it might take you a while, it might.
Yeah.
And that's why we're kind of phasing this out. Phase one is like tiptoe into it, and we're just going to have to do it. We're just going to have to try it out, right? But maybe you're a small agency, that's not necessary. So there will be, like I said, some guidelines and whatnot around that. Now, as for furniture, we haven't contemplated that at all. And it's so DAS real estate can help with configuring and whatnot of what you have, and we can certainly see if there's other furniture available. I think part of the guidelines are going to be, though, focus on the people part first, and then we'll solve the furniture problem, because that's an easy problem to solve at some point.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Shannon, you brought up the point that these are going to be guidelines and that each agency is going to have to take into consideration those guidelines and apply it to their individual environment, which I think it's going to feel like a little bit more flexibility than agencies are accustomed to in their relationship with DAS. I can give an example inside of DAS where we're already starting to implement this, and that is with the financial business systems. Most of you know Trudy Vidal and her folks, and Fabiola that runs the SFMS, and Jason that runs the OSPS. They moved from the first floor of the exec building out to a room in the print plant. And they looked at this as an experiment on what remote work really looks like for them. And this may not even apply to you, but kind of follow their logic. For them, they simply asked the employees, "Are you willing to share space?" And or are you very bent on needing your own space? We are, after all, in a pandemic, and so there's folks that wanted to take that into consideration. What they really found as the result is, for the people that need to be in the office 3 days a week, they really wanted their own space, and so they simply rounded them up into a cube of your own. For the folks that were only there once or twice a week, they tended to feel that they could share the space. They could hot bunk, if you will. And so they simply rounded them down into that hoteling space. And it really did kind of follow those patterns for that group. Now they're just a microcosm of DAS in general. They are working with right around 22 to 25 people. So they're an analogy for a small agency. They are administrative in nature and back office. So this is not to be applied to a program-based agency, but really kind of that administrative function. And so that's how they went. What they found was they could reduce their space by around, I think their occupied space by around 50 to 60%. And then because they really wanted to challenge themselves on going paperless, they reduced their storage space by over 80%. So there are a lot of, and because we're DAS and we charge ourselves rent, we are able to adapt to that very, very quickly. For agencies that are in leased space, that may not happen overnight. So there's a lot of other considerations to kind of go into that as well. Brian Bowling, you have your hand up.
Yeah, one of the questions that we have is around kind of remote work, out of state remote work, and how much this group might take that conversation, or a subgroup take that conversation on. We're getting requests for that out of state remote work, on a periodic basis, which has always been the case, but now on a permanent basis, and especially with our neighboring states, it does change tax implications, and we've been requested to give them letters on certain things, and a lot more requests for working in other states further away on a permanent basis. And at this time, when we've been asking, it's been to talk to DOJ around these cases on an individual agency basis. But then when we actually find out that there's something that needs to be changed, like payroll taxes, our payroll systems can't handle those situations. So is the enterprise looking at that kind of holistically for all agencies, so that we can all use the same information on not only allowing it in certain states or not allowing it because of workers' comp or tax implications? Like, how is that being rolled?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And it's happening across the enterprise. I know that we have got the enterprise as a whole has 4 or 5 folks now that live on the East Coast, and and other places in between. So that is absolutely a work stream, Brian, for this group, and there will be some information that comes out of this that everybody can use, and we can stop one-offing it with DOJ as agency by agency. So that the info is coming, as well as the implications for workers' comp and payroll, and there's one other one. I even think it gets in a little bit into retirement somehow, but I am not on that group specifically on that, but there is information coming out for sure. And we're working with DOJ right now around the enterprise question.
Great, because there's also unemployment implications.
That was it, unemployment, not retirement. Yes.
Okay, I think Kim, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and add this as a topic for our next ABSD meeting as well, so that we can continue to have a discussion on reopening state government. One other thing I want to make sure of is, because we have the EAM folks here, are there folks, and it's maybe not the right time yet, but are there folks that are anticipating a need for enterprise assets that were not already included in your governor's recommended budget? Or are you nervous about getting a car, getting space, looking at new programs coming up, so on and so forth? As those needs pop up, please, please, please Do not hesitate to give Shannon Ryan, Jeremy Miller, Brian King, Brady Ricks. Do not hesitate to give them a call. Otherwise, the earliest we'll be able to secure some of those resources will be the February session. We'll do what we can to get you through it. Of course, we're DAS. We adapt very well, especially to emergent needs. But give them a holler. Any more questions for Shannon when it comes to return to work? This is a great open forum. I do not want to stifle any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, please, if anyone has a question, let me know. I just wanted to interject real quickly that back to that communication piece about what we're working on. As soon as we get that connoitered, if you will, between labor and then the rest of the enterprise, we'll be sure and copy this group on what we send out. So we share the information with the deputy directors in the work in the advisory group, and then they fan it out. But we'll just cut to the chase and send it directly to you as well.
I know a lot of us had a tough time getting employees to the remote work environment. It was like trying to rid the hotel of roaches. That's my attempt at humor for the day. And now we may be challenged with trying to get people back into the office. Is anybody else facing that kind of a dilemma? How many folks are experiencing, and this is one thing that we had a discussion yesterday when it came to sustainability and what are our efforts in recycling looking like? And we were looking and we're very proud, of course, that we're sending the majority of our waste into the recycling rather than into landfills. And then suddenly it popped up, wait a minute, we may not be recycling as much paper in the future because we're simply not using it the way that we used to. Any good success stories out there as far as your agencies are concerned on changing processes, making improvements, paper savings, blah, blah, blah?
This is Brian. I can speak for DEQ. I mean, I think through this, we've learned a lot. We've implemented a lot of technology that has allowed electronic signatures, which has, time cards used to be printed out. Now they're not. We just really have done an overhaul overall, and it's been extremely successful. It's allowed us to really see if people can work remotely. I think it's overall been a big success for us. And I think that's part of some people don't want to be back in the office. And so the work that Shannon and her group has been doing is really important for us because we want to be able to have that work-life balance. And people are really seeing that, at least at the EQ, remote work is giving that work-life balance a lot more. And it's an attractive thing for bringing new individuals into state service. And I think that's something that may have prevented others that would like to be in public service, but didn't have that luxury or didn't see that ability to do this. So promoting that in recruiting is going to be a great tool to getting a better candidates potentially that want to be in public service.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, this is our moment to be that employer of choice. So that's a great point, Brian.
Yeah. And in an odd way, the COVID pandemic has helped DEQ achieve some of its goals, reduction in carbon output from vehicles on the roads and whatnot. So this is a great micro case study for y'all up at DEQ. Shannon, I know. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a plug here. I put in the chat. You may or may not know of this website, but it's the Work Reimagine website. It's part of the CHRO pages, and on it is a survey. And we've put our heads together from all parts of DAS to put this survey together. And it takes you in different tracks. You're a manager, you're a remote worker, you're not a remote worker. And then it kind of brings you back around again. But it really we've tried to be as holistic as possible in understanding where people are at right now, both from a professional standpoint as well as kind of where they're at. For example, we asked, did you move? And if you moved to the rural places, would you be open to a drop-in space? And that there's all kinds of questions. So you can go ahead and encourage your folks to take it. We are gathering that data, and it's really going to help inform and guide the recommendations that we're working on now, as well as going into the future. And this is enterprise-wide, and it's anonymous. So check it out.
So Shannon, you and I have talked about making the buildings themselves not just more healthy, but also even more efficient, with not just a energy usage lens, but also with an equity and inclusion lens. So for instance, one idea that I keep pushing, and of course may never happen, would be an example of like DMV, where the DMV building is, we're in a lot of leased space. We own a bit of that space as well, and we're using it somewhat efficiently, except that it's open from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And so from an equity and inclusion lens, why couldn't we open that building up at 7 in the morning and keep it open until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, or having it open on a Saturday? And it would reduce the number of employees in the building at a time, because we could split shifts. And it would also include, for a customer service standpoint, those folks that cannot come in during the daylight hours, that maybe they only get one day off during the week. And so with very, very little extra cost, we could make the building itself more efficient. An alternative to that might be closing a building for a Friday or a Monday during the week, and allowing the building to rest for 3 days consistently rather than just 2 days. Another alternative, and it's interesting that we all talk about hoteling individual cubicles. If you really wanted to push those boundaries, why not hotel entire agencies? If the agency only has 3 or 4 people, why not hotel it? And those are kind of extreme examples, but those are all on the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. And I think those answers are not going to necessarily come by September. But that is certainly one of the end goals. I know when we look at it from a landowner and a building owner's perspective, and that does get to some of our goals. We would love to be able to have a building that's just for drop-in, be it Salem or Portland or wherever. We'd love to be able to maybe close buildings, only have them open X part of the week. So those will be ongoing discussions, and we'll certainly be hopeful and helpful around any of that. But that I think that is the future, right? That's how we get more efficient and quite frankly relevant.
So disaster always spawns innovation, and this is our opportunity not just to reopen Oregon on September 1st and think that we have all of the answers, but really to design the workplace for the next 2, 3, 4 decades. Okay.
It looks like we have a question.
Yay, Ms. McLean, how are you?
Oops. Hi, Brian. Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
I'll turn on my little camera here. I am trying to, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. Part of what I'm thinking about, so much of work is connected to the computers and 365 and things working efficiently. And the challenges of, whether an agency has allowed, big monitors to go home or not go home, and access to printers. And I know that my experience has been sometimes a struggle with the connectivity issues from an IT perspective. And to me, for any of this to be successful, as more and more of our IT things need to be more shored up. I know that sometimes, like even for example, on a call like this, we can't have our cameras on because we we don't have the bandwidth or whatever it is. I don't understand what that technology issue is that doesn't allow people to kind of all be in one place, which was the ideal, and would probably be the most ideal things for people to be able to see each other and talk to one another. But I have so many meetings where we can't even do that because the sound doesn't work, or the feed doesn't work. And I think that's probably a bit, what do you call that, broadband issue or something. But I don't know all of those technical things. But I think that for a lot of this to be really successful long term, more of those kinds of things have to be improved. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Karen, that makes perfect sense. And I think some of the things that LFO and CFO and EIS, the Enterprise Information Systems, are looking at is unpacking some of the federal dollars that are coming in and how much of that can be applied toward broadband, and especially for the rural areas. And let's face it, you only need to be 4 minutes outside of downtown Salem and you're in a rural area. And Portland's same kind of thing. And many of us live in rural areas. It's also an opportunity to provide economic development across Oregon. You look at 400 miles wide, 250, 300 miles deep. We have opportunity to provide economic development there. And then one other thing that EIS is beginning to kick off is a complete replace of the state's network. The state network was installed many, many years ago, and so they're looking at making it much more robust and much more modern. So that is coming, and they just began to kick that off as well. But you really hit the nail on the head. It's about making a much more robust broadband network across the entire state.
Well, and I be clear to say it's amazing what's happened in a year from a networking perspective with Office 365 with Teams, and I'm really grateful for that. I know in the very first month it was like, how are we going to do this? And we've come a long way. So I give kudos to all of those folks in those areas. But with kind of the reimagined work site, I think that it's even more of an issue, and I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
All right, folks, I want to be respectful of your time. We've come up to 10:30. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. It's very robust. Really appreciate it. We will bring the Reopening Oregon back to the next ABSD meeting. I want to thank all of the EAM staff who held on and are coping with the audible that was called to let Shannon just do all of the talking this time around. Really appreciate that. If you have any questions on any EAM service at all, give us a holler. Lots and lots of folks are bugging Sven right now when it comes to, do you have some cubicle furniture that I can use? And so we want to keep those calls coming in as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next month. Take care.